Wonderful. Here we are, Patrick Redford here. I'm here with Andy Luttrell, and we are here to talk about his brand new book, Psychology for the Mentalist. It's right here. If you haven't seen the book, this is it. It is a wonderful, wonderful read if you take the time to read it. If you don't take the time to read it, it's still a wonderful read. Anyway, Andy, hi. Thanks very much for being on this call. Appreciate you being here. Say hello to everybody.
Hello, everybody.
That's a great start so far. First of all, I just wanted to say thank you very much for letting me release this book. I'm really excited about it, and I know that there's a few hundred copies out there in the world now, and other people are getting excited about it finally as well. We've been working on this project for what seems like forever to get this book out into the world, but it's finally available for purchase for you folks out there. But I wanted to sit down with Andy and introduce him to you folks, because not a lot of people have heard of you before now, and hopefully people are going to be paying a lot more attention as well from this point on. But can you give us some of your background in, first of all, just performance-wise, where do your interests lie, where do you come from in that regard, and then we'll delve into all the important stuff about the psychology and your background there.
Sure. Yeah, so I mean, if we go all the way back, I've been interested in magic for a long time. So since I was very little, got a magic set, it's the classic story. It's almost not worth repeating. So I got into magic, and I was doing work at a magic shop near me and doing like restaurant stuff. And it was around right at the end of being in high school that my interest really shifted to mentalism. And it just really captured my attention. I thought it was just such a unique and perplexing type of performance. It really rested a lot on the performance itself. And I think that's what drew me into it as well. And so in college, I continued to pursue those interests. And I was also starting to do some sketch and improv comedy. And so I was doing a lot of that in college, and I was on the speech team. So I was getting a lot of performance experience. And that was, I think, really fueling my interest in mentalism as well. So this is kind of back and forth between public communication and performance and doing mentalism even casually or in a more formal setting. And so though that's kind of was the peak of my mentalism interest, and then that's when I moved to Ohio for grad school. And so now I'm in a social psychology PhD program, but I still do performance. I still help coach the speech team. I teach psychology, and I do stand-up comedy around town. So even though I'm not performing a lot of mentalism these days per se, I do think I have some insight into both performance and effectively connecting with an audience, and also the psychology stuff, which I'm sure we're going to get into. So I think that's my way of introduction. I think that pretty much captures my history. Is that about what you had in mind?
That works for you, yes, absolutely. Although you kind of left out where you were born, how you came into the world, what your parents did exactly in the bedroom. Actually, we don't need details.
There were a few details I left out consciously, I think.
That's quite all right. So you did mention you are a PhD student and you are working fiercely on that. What made you write this book? Why did you want to write this? How did it come to be?
It's actually weird because I think the idea for it started pretty early in grad school. I think I'm in my 6th year of my PhD program now. And in that first year, I started to get this inkling that I was starting to learn a ton, I mean, at a very rapid pace about psychology. And, I had been thinking about mentalism and magic and sort of being uncomfortable with the way people talk about psychology in the mentalism community in general. I think there's a lot of fake psychology thrown around, not to say that it's not worthwhile or is helpful, but it's not really rooted in what makes psychological science really great. And so I just started to notice those connections and thought, it'd be really neat to kind of bring real scientific psychology to this audience who seems really interested in psychology and could benefit from it. And there really wasn't a ton else that was exactly doing what I wanted to do. And so then over the next few years, I would write occasionally short chapters of what ended up being this book, and including ideas I had had for a while about effects and routining and stuff. And then it wasn't until maybe a couple years ago where I really thought, you know what, let's just do this. Let's just write the whole thing and start to put it together. And then that's where you got involved in the project as well. And now it's actually out in the world, which is pretty exciting. So it's a long time coming, but I think
it really is a fantastic project, and it's the first book within the community that I'm aware of that really tackles the problem of cited references full force. I mean, there have been many books out there before that are certainly interesting and fascinating and worthwhile, but none of them that I can think of go to the extent that your project has gone to, where it really it's a crash course in social psychology. Essentially, it makes the reader, if they take these tools and this information, it'll make you look a lot smarter than you probably are, which is good for all of us that you did all this work for us. But this really is, and something I mentioned in the foreword of the book, this really is the book that I always wanted to write and sit down and do. I was a psychology major in college as well, and this is the type of project that I always dreamed of doing, but never got around to it. So I'm thrilled that you have, and I'm thrilled that it exists, and it's really wonderful. Some people have said some nice things about it. Dan Harlan wrote a glowing review of this. If you haven't read the reviews on the website, go check it out, patrickredford.com/psychology for the mentalist.html, or just go to patrickredford.com. You can just click through right there from the main page. Mark Salem also said wonderful things about it. Sean Waters, Richard Marks, the list goes on and on. All have wonderful things to say about this book, and we're just saying you got to read it, right? It's a must read. If you're doing mentalism and you want to take this stuff seriously, and even if you don't take it seriously and you don't want to be the expert psychological performer, there are wonderful nuggets of information within this text that you will go away with more understanding of things that you're already probably doing, and just by understanding things more fully. I think you'll agree. And for some reason, the camera was on your face during all of that. I apologize. Sorry, folks who are watching at home. This is the person talking. Andy's not doing ventriloquism, unless that's something in your notebook that I'm not aware of.
That's next.
But everybody's going to take something away from this text, whether you're doing the psychological performance or the pure psychic performance, or you're just even a magician wanting to explore these techniques a little bit further, a little bit more in depth, and really understand where they came from and how they've been tested and how they've been explored in both laboratory conditions and performance conditions as well. You kind of cover everything here.
Yeah, but one thing I'd like to note too, though, is that it doesn't cover everything about psychology. And I think that's what the value of it is oftentimes people are like, where do I go to learn about psychology? And there are books thrown around, go read an intro psych textbook. And that you will learn about psychology doing that. But when I was younger and I read that same advice, I'd go looking for information on psychology. And then none of it, I couldn't see how it was related. It seemed too distant from actual implementation into performance. So I really hope that that's what this book does, is it strips out stuff from real psychology that would be relevant to mentalism and makes those connections really clear with some actual practical ideas.
Absolutely. That was one of the frustrating things for me when I was in school, is that I was sitting through all these psychology courses, and while they are fascinating, they weren't relevant to what I was really interested in looking at fully. And then if I wanted to talk about those things with my professors as just an undergrad, most of them went, we don't understand. What are you talking about? Because it was so foreign from what they were looking at. So when I did my final thesis paper in school, it was so far removed from anything anybody else was really thinking about or focusing on that we were just kind of butting heads. So that's something I do appreciate about your text, is that you've taken all of it's not crap, but it's crap or irrelevant to what we as performers would be most interested in looking at and doing. One of the sections that I found the most fascinating and really appreciated as well was your section on subliminal persuasion. Because that is so much of a core technique, or rather presentational ploy, that we use as psychological performers to supposedly be influencing people. And some of that is maybe real, maybe not real, depending on what we're actually talking about. But rarely do you really stop and think and look at the research that says subliminal persuasion is not really a thing that's as powerful as we think it is. But on the other hand, it can be in the right context. And it's all about the context that is being used. We've all been familiar with the study, and you talk about it in the book as well, about the subliminal messages on the movie screen that came in that turned out didn't actually make people buy more concessions at the concession stand. But we like to think that it could. And I see a lot of performers using that as a presentational ploy, as if that's still a real thing. But that's actually wrong, isn't it?
And there's no evidence that the guy in the movie theater ever presented those messages to people. The data were just made up, totally, completely made up. But that in itself could be an interesting premise, to say that this thing has been falsified, but here I'm going to do it. I'm actually going to show you that it can happen. Absolutely.
But as soon as you stand there and try to preach that as gospel, so to speak, actually, if you're preaching it as gospel, perhaps that is a disclaimer in and of itself. Who knows? But maybe that's my bias coming into it. But you do talk about in the book also what subliminal persuasion techniques are useful and the context that they're useful in. Can you talk about a little bit about that now?
Sure. So I think strewn about, there's a bunch of those techniques. I think you're probably talking about like the compliance section.
Yep, exactly.
So there are things, and this is stuff that one of the books that often gets recommended is Robert Cialdini's Principles of Persuasion, or 6 Principles of Influence, whatever. There are a couple versions of the book, which again are really interesting, but that book is written a little bit more towards sales and marketing and not to performers.
Sure.
But audience handling is essentially influence, right? How can you get people to adopt the mannerisms and behaviors, follow direction, and so forth? So there are a bunch of interesting norms that people follow that once you know kind of the automatic rules people use for guiding their everyday behavior, you can kind of take advantage of those rules and turn them into strategies to actually have real influence. So I'll tip just one of them, and my favorite is, I think, the "because you are free" technique. And that one's not in Cialdini's book, but it's a relatively recent one, because there's this resistance people have to being influenced. People don't want to be influenced, as you might know if you're ever trying to adopt that presentation. And so how do you kind of get people to do something without seeming like you're trying to force them to do something? And so with this technique, because you are free, or the "but you are free" technique, is making sure you state that you don't have to follow what I'm saying. You're totally free to say no to what I'm asking you to do, and just putting that one sentence in your request makes it all the more likely that people will comply and do what it is you're asking them to do. So that's just one example of how, by understanding more about how people normally operate and interact with other people, you can then create a strategy to get around what might otherwise be a roadblock.
Oops, sorry, there was a small delay there. I apologize about that. Besides this book, The Psychology of Communication book, and by the way, you can get that at patrickredford.com. If we haven't already mentioned that, there's some new viewers that just popped on to the call, so I want to keep them updated as well. You also have a wonderful website that you are running and starting up with some really fascinating things over there. Can you talk about your website, which is socialpsychonline.com?
Yeah, you can get there at socialpsychonline.com or beapeopleexpert.com. Both of them will go to it. So that, I'm super excited about that. That's sort of been this project that I started over the summer. Over the summer, I started teaching some online psychology courses. They're video courses. You can find them on the website if you're interested. But it sort of sparked me into finally doing this blog that I've always wanted to do. Because again, there's a lot of really solid science in psychology that isn't always communicated to the public in the best way. So there's a lot of hand-waving or ignoring important considerations, or even just publishing things that were never empirically studied. And so what I wanted to do was create some space online, and there are other websites like this too, but where I could sort of, in my own voice, explain interesting and captivating findings in psychological science in a way that hopefully connects with people. So as an example, tomorrow, I think we're doing this live. So tomorrow on Tuesday, there's going to be this big article on false confessions because I got really wrapped up in making a murderer over this winter break. And there's just this amazing job bringing up the idea that people can confess to crimes that they never did. And so why do people do that? How can they get away with doing that? Why are juries still swayed by confessions, even when it's possible that they were coerced and not true? So that's just one example of taking findings in psychology that pertain to people's interest, but presenting them in a way that honors the science behind them.
That's a really fascinating show. We could talk for hours just about that show, probably, and lost and find ourselves far, far away from talking about your book, and somehow still be talking about your book all at the same time.
Right. That would be the underlying theme.
I was wondering, is there anything from the book that you could share with us right now on this call that you think people would be excited about hearing about, that maybe the people who have the book may have overlooked that particular thing, the people who don't have that book wouldn't expect that particular thing to be in there? Is there anything in your book that you...
Yeah, I like to think there's a lot in the book that people would be interested in. I think maybe one thing, if you aren't motivated to flip all the way to the back of the book, there's some cool stuff that I actually collected data on that could be useful to people. And so if you've read the book, Psychology of the Psychic, it's from the 70s, I think.
Yeah, that's a great book.
Yeah, it's a great book. And at the end, there's this appendix on, I think, what are they called? Population stereotypes is the term that they use. So I just adopted the same term. But the point is, the number 7 force is an example of just most people tend to think of 7 when you ask them to think of a number between 1 and 10. Mm-hmm. No particular reason for it necessarily, but we just know through data and asking this question over and over that for whatever reason, there's more times that people say 7 than you would expect by chance. So that's one example of what they call the population stereotype. And they presented some other data that were like, some of the 37 forces in there, a couple other circle triangle things. And I thought, well, what in the modern age are there things that we're missing? Are there population stereotypes that we don't know about? And could we get really data that could give us information about that? So I collected data online using a sort of random sample of people using Amazon's Mechanical Turk program. Quick answers to questions. There are things like, if you roll a die, what number comes up? So if you ask people to imagine, are people over-reporting one number over others? And they are. You can find out what those are. Things like, just think of a room in your house, think of a vegetable. Some of them, we know about already, but there might be patterns there that you didn't know about, and I'm just providing data for you at the end. So that might be one that could capture people's interest.
Well, certainly. Let's talk about how this book is set up for just a moment for those who don't have the book yet. It's set up in 2 sections. So the first section is the part that talks about the techniques and the research studies. The second part is labeled as mentalism applications that are kind of more of the effects. But at the same time, that's also a little bit misleading in a way, because the whole book is sprinkled with applications of how these principles can be applied to what you're doing. So if you've gone on the website and you've downloaded the free preview that's up there that they can get, and you scroll through and you look at the index and you know, the mentalism application part is only so long. Don't think of it that way, because it's the entire book has those applications in it. But the book has been set up this way just because it was easier to classify some things in those 2 sections that way than anywhere else. Much like my own books, I always sprinkle in a little bit at the end of each effect, which adds additional ideas, additional effects, and so on. And this is very similar in that way, in that throughout the text. And don't just skim this book, because you will miss so much wonderful information that Andy has packed into these pages. You will find little applications, little presentation toys, presentation plots that you might not have thought of before. It's a great inspiration for that, for calling new plot lines into your own material as well. Why is the book set up this way? Why did we do 2 sections? Tell them about that.
Yeah, so originally, I didn't plan to have them in 2 sections. It was just going to be one book. And even though the table of contents has 2 sections, it's not like pages 1 through 100 are theory and 100 through 200 applications. It's just showing where the concrete applications are. So as I was writing the book, it was really more about psychology, and interlaced with that was just thoughts about presentation and just working in effects just within the text itself. But I guess I was just worried that people would just see it more as a textbook and not as something that was really clearly for magicians and mentalists with really workable ideas in there.
And in fact, it's both.
Yeah, it's totally both. And so I think by clarifying that with their own headings, I just wanted to convey that, yes, there's plenty in here that is sort of ready to go. Think about it, applications for mentalism and magic. And it's not just you're reading a textbook about psychology. So I think that was the thought process behind it. It was just to really clarify what I'm trying to provide the reader with.
Absolutely. Well, I don't want to keep too much of your time going here, but I hope that this interview helps some folks out there who are on the fence about purchasing the book get a more idea about exactly what this is, what it's about, and how it will really benefit them fully. So, Andy, thanks so much for hopping on this call with me today. I appreciate your time. I appreciate your book, and I really look forward to seeing more of them out there in the near future and seeing all the wonderful feedback that we've been getting just grow.
Yeah, thank you so much. It's been great to see the reaction already to the book. It's, like I said, it was years in the making, so I'm happy to see it finally have a printed copy in my hands. So that's always nice. And again, I encourage anyone to go to thepeopleexpert.com or socialpsychonline.com if you're just interested in psychology in general. You can get some interesting stuff there, I think.
Yeah, Andy does some really, really fascinating videos, and I look forward to more of those. If you do already have the book, please spread the word about this project. We're really excited about it, but we can't spread the word without your help. So if you do have the book and you enjoy the book, please post in your favorite places to post on Facebook, post on your favorite web forums, whatever you have out there that you're connected with to get the word out about this fantastic text, because I really think that this is an instant classic. Again, thanks very much, Andy, for joining me on this call. Thanks for everybody who's watching, and thank you for supporting Psychology for the Mentalist. We'll see you soon.